everyone. It's Nicole again. Last day here from NAOC 2016. We've got a special guest, Erin Spencer, here with us. So I'm gonna throw up our Twitter handles real quick, so you can catch it. I'm Wildlife Bio Gal, and Erin is
E.T. Spencer.
Yep. And if you want to be able to check out things afterwards, go to wildlifebiogal.com. Sometime later, not necessarily today, probably a couple more days after I've recovered from the conference, because I think you guys can all see exactly how tired I am today. I'll be putting everything up on YouTube and making the podcast like I normally do. So, but yeah, we were really lucky we got Erin here. Finally realized, I'm in Washington, D.C., Erin's in Washington, D.C., let's get this thing rolling. And she was really awesome and biked over here to the hotel where the conference is at so we could have a fun chat with all of you guys. So we're just going to talk about how Erin's got to the point where she is in her career with science communication and invasive species. I'm going to leave it pretty open for you guys, so if you guys have any questions, feel free to fire away as we're talking, and we'll do our best to answer things. Other than that, why don't you just give us a little rundown background of who you are, where you went to school, all that fun stuff. So
Sure. Well, first off, thanks for the invite to come.
You're welcome.
I love how we were just talking about how great Twitter is, where she tweeted at me yesterday, "Are you around?" And I was like, "Absolutely, I'll be there." And here we are. So my name is Erin Spencer. I am an invasive species nerd and a science communicator. I went to undergrad at the College of William and Mary, and I graduated there in 2014. After that, I spent a little bit of time in Florida doing work on lionfish, and then came back here to work with National Geographic, and now I'm with the Ocean Conservancy, an ocean nonprofit here in DC. I am a Young Explorer grantee with National Geographic, and they have funded a couple of my invasive species projects. And my first one was in 2012, and that was in South Florida, looking at community responses to invasive lionfish. So it was an interview-based project, talking with dive masters and fishermen and researchers and chefs, essentially seeing how their day-to-day life was changing because of this invasive species. I was originally interested in invasive species when I was in early high school. I was scuba diving down in South Florida and saw a lionfish, and it was the most beautiful fish I had ever seen, and I had never seen anything like it. And then someone speared it, and it came up behind me, and they speared it, and it really caught me off guard and got me interested. So then I went back and did research in South Florida, and then seeing how these people from all walks of life had really innovative approaches to handling lionfish. It got me interested in how people were tackling it and tackling other invasive species throughout the country and around the world. So now, a couple years later, I launched the Invasive Species Initiative, which is a website, and I've been fortunate to travel to many places around the country and around the world, kind of tracking the cool ways people are fighting back against invasive species. So that is a super fast rundown of where I'm coming from, but
who Erin is.
Yeah. And I think one of the things I love most about studying invasive species is I consider it like a gateway drug to conservation, because anyone can do something to fight back against invasives or help prevent the spread of invasives. And in the case of the folks that I'm working with, it's a chef who is incorporating lionfish on their menu, and if someone is eating a lionfish for dinner, maybe they're not eating a native grouper, that kind of thing. But it can also be as simple as planting native plants in your garden and paying more attention to what you're putting in your garden.
We just had a comment, we need those Asian longhorn beetles out of here. There's so many different invasive species that people may not realize that they have in their own backyard per se.
Absolutely. And everyone, I feel, has a story about invasives and how they have somehow impacted their life. I think there's another thing is people things that seem native because you are just used to seeing them around.
I've got to laugh at that when we get a comment here from a Get Ready Girl. Is lionfish the main course? Yes. Awesome fun. Good job. Quality.
I don't know. Have you ever eaten lionfish?
I have not. I was wanting to. Like, I was kind of hoping, like, being here, like, there might be some place around, and I've not had time with the conference being, like, just as crazy as it is to actually get out to really, like, see if there's anywhere.
So here in DC,
I might have to make a special trip down just to, like,
probably
have lionfish.
Here in DC, there's no place right now where you can just go to a restaurant and get lionfish. There's an event coming up in a couple weeks where we're trying to bring some lionfish up here. But there are places here in DC that serve invasive species on their menu. You can have snakehead, invasive fish here in this region, blue catfish, which is really good.
I'm also hungry right now, so I think pretty much anything you say is going to sound really good.
Sound really good. There's a restaurant over in Union Market, which is this great little food. I don't know how to describe it. Lots of different stands with different types of foods, and you can get the invasivore sandwich, which is fried snakehead, which was pretty good. So
Yeah, like it was nice a couple years back at IGLR, which is the International Association of Great Lakes Research. They were actually serving Asian carp.
Oh yeah,
as like one of the little side things for one of the social gatherings at the conference, and it was kind of cool. Like you felt like you were fighting back against invasive species while still having fun.
Exactly.
Which I think is like a good way. I mean, yes, it's going to be very difficult for everyone in the world, to be able to eat enough invasive species to really help combat it. But it's still one. Not only is it making a little bit of a dent into it, but it's also like really promoting, helping people to understand about it in a way that they can enjoy and have fun with. I think too.
And I agree. And education is one of the most important components. Where maybe eating one lionfish is not going to have a huge dent, but it leads to the conversation about invasive species, which is huge. And that's lionfish were introduced because of aquarium releases, right? And that was likely someone who didn't quite know what to do with the fish and thought it was the humane thing to do. And so if we can educate people of actually releasing your pets is not good for the environment, it's not good for the pets, and getting lionfish in front of people, whether that's on a menu or on a dive boat. A lot of the dive boats I've seen down in Florida, they'll spear lionfish when they're out on dives, and people can actually take a class to learn how to spear lionfish and do it as like a recreational activity. And then when they're back up on the boat, certain dive shops, I know the Islamorada Dive Center does this, they'll open the stomach content, they'll look at the stomach contents of the fish and actually show people, look at all of the native fish species that this lionfish is eating.
That's a great way to do it, for sure.
Yeah.
It is, I mean, it's not just, an issue here in the States. I saw that we had someone tuning in from Portugal there, and it's a worldwide problem with invasive species. Wherever you go, there's always going to be something. So like you said, you traveled around to different spots. How are other countries that you visited with invasive species? How are their management practices? Are people getting it, or are they still... I kind of feel like here in the U.S. people aren't still quite getting it. They're slowly getting there, but not quite to the point where it's all right, we're all championing and running down the street with a invasive species flag to say this is an issue.
It's a good question, and a lot of the work I've done has been on islands. And people on islands, this is my anecdotal experience, definitely have a much better grasp on the problem of invasive species and how it impacts them. My most recent project was last year. I was in Fiji looking at community-based invasive species management there, and everyone that I talked to in Fiji had a story about invasive species and then how it directly impacted them. So how the myna bird was going after their fruits and vegetables that they were growing outside of their homes that have a direct impact on their ability to have fresh food, that kind of stuff. The work I did in Fiji, I feel like anyone who's pitched a research project kind of knows this. I had this whole project that I pitched and it was funded, and I got to Fiji, and within a week I realized that there was no story there, and it was a total the resources that I had found online weren't necessarily representative of what I saw. And I had to kind of come up with something new on the spot, and thankfully I just kind of put out this call on Facebook, and some stranger contacted me and was like, have you heard of the iguanas in Fiji?
Oh.
And I was like, no. But there was this incredible story of the Fijian crested iguana, which is an endemic species to Fiji. It's only found on 3 islands there. And they were almost extinct because of the threat of invasive species, particularly invasive goats, goats, rats, and weeds.
Okay.
And how this nonprofit worked with the villagers on this island of Yandua, next to where the iguanas were, to completely change how they live their day-to-day life.
Okay.
And they actually got rid of all of their own goats, and now the island is goat-free. It's almost rat-free, and the iguanas have rebounded into the tens of thousands. So it's this incredible story of how you can actually get people to change their behavior to save a species from being extinct from invasives.
Do you think it's easier in like smaller communities like that, where they're gonna be more, I think, aware of what's going on? Because I mean, I could be wrong, but like I always have felt like, you know, like the pollination communities and stuff, they're more in tune with their natural areas, so they're going to notice those invasive species impacts a little bit sooner than maybe what we here in the States would necessarily notice, and so they're more likely to be proactive, you know, when people are saying, hey, you have a problem, you know, we're willing to help you out. And do you think that's the case, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I think I agree that at least in the communities that I was working with, they did seem much more in tune with their environment. And, you know, this particular instance, you know, you're working with this one island that, say, there's like 70 families in this village. Like, you can go to every single family in that village and have that conversation with them, which is not feasible here, right? That if you're going to go to every family that's impacted by lionfish, like, you will never stop. I mean, you know, so, but I think that there's so much we can learn looking at those isolated examples of successful management and then see kind of their best practices and what they were doing right. And see how we can extrapolate that or apply that to other regions. Okay. You know, and as you said, invasive species are such a massive problem that it's going to take, like, there's no silver bullet, right? It's going to take looking at how people are handling it in all different parts of the world and different types of communities, and then how we can learn from that. So
yeah, I mean it's a multifaceted thing that you have to do to like combat it. Like, you have to, like, you know, get education with the public and in so many different ways to reach the public, you know, where they're at and things like that. So like, and I think that's where science communication really comes in, with how do you hit the public with being able to you know, let them know this is an issue and keep it in their minds too, because it's not just, I think, good enough to let, you know, them see one time. They might see, like, you know, one tweet or, like, you know, one TV ad or something, but unless, like, you keep hammering it in, people aren't going to necessarily notice or pay attention, because there's so much information out there that it's impossible to, like, keep track, because we always say, like, our thing is that we say Twitter is a fire hose of information, and so it's, like, really difficult to always kind of keep track of things, and everything in life. There's so much information. How do you keep track, and how do you get your message through? And so how do you guys use science communication to kind of get the message out about racism issues?
Yeah, well, I think, so I personally have used Twitter quite a bit, just as a way, for me it was originally just a way to find other people who were doing the same thing that I was doing, and kind of learn the track of, because when I started doing this, I was a sophomore in college. Okay. And I didn't know the first thing about putting together a research grant, or the fun story is, in my first research grant, I completely screwed up my budgeting for this lionfish work, and I ran out of food money, so I ate lionfish like every day for 2 weeks.
Wow.
So,
I mean, food's kind of important, but hey, like, now you've got a good story to be able to say, like, I was so invested in this project that...
And I used all my money on diving, so it wasn't like a waste. But anyway, so I originally turned to Twitter as a resource, like, for me to learn from other people, and then I found that as I was just posting about my experience, people would tweet at me and say, hey, actually, we have this really interesting thing that we're doing with invasive species. And I think it's this cumulative thing. Like, the more you talk about it, the more people will interact with you and send it to their friends, like, tag me and tag someone else and be like, hey, did you talk to her? Because, you know, and I loved it. I had a blog, because I was working with National Geographic, and I had a blog posted on their site, and you know, when I tweet out something, I'll maybe be one person who's like, cool, and then if Nat Geo tweets out something, all of a sudden,
boom,
everyone is talking to you.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was a it was a real culture shock because I had people saying like, wow, I had no idea they were so invasive, or wow, I didn't know you could eat lionfish, and then I can't believe you're killing this fish. Like, I got all sorts of reactions, but again, it's about starting that conversation. And so I rely pretty heavily on Twitter. I'm a photographer as well, and so I use Instagram as a pretty cool tool.
How do you find that differs with, because like I put a lot of pictures on Twitter just because it helps people to be able to see it, and they're more likely to click on it if there's that image there. How do you like kind of separate like what you put up on Twitter versus Instagram? Because we've had many conversations. Like, is it just the same thing but just to different people? Like, how do you kind of like separate like out like what you're putting on Instagram? Because I also like too with Instagram you can do a little bit more long form posting with it to kind of explain a little bit more. Because with Twitter it's so short. Like, what can you do with really truly explaining to people what you're trying to get across?
Right.
So kind of like how do you like tease apart like what you put where? Like, do you just put all the pretty pictures on Instagram?
Right. That's so interesting. I'm trying to think. So my audiences, I think, for Twitter and for Instagram are really different because how I kind of built up my Twitter and who I followed was mostly like the science community, and then my Instagram. Before I was doing this, I worked in like travel and travel media. So most of the people that I interact with on Instagram are like travel bloggers or kind of a totally different audience. And so how you appeal to them, to those two audiences is different. So I think you can kind of like put up the really pretty pictures on Instagram, like hook them with a pretty picture, and then keep them with the facts or something, right? Like,
I like that.
And then I think those captions are really important. And I think another thing I do on Instagram that I don't do quite as much on Twitter is I think people appreciate seeing like what goes into field work, the like not so pretty stuff. Like when I had a flat tire in the rain, like miles away on Fiji, no town and no jack in my car. Like, what do I do about that? Right, those kind of stuff. Or when I'm in this boat ride where I had to jam myself in between the side of the boat and the supplies so I wouldn't get tossed overboard, and it was like one of the most unflattering pictures I've ever seen of myself, but like throwing that up on Instagram.
It's kind of like a day in the life kind of
day in the life,
right?
Absolutely.
Which I still think is like really important because I think it helps humanize scientists and lets the public know like, hey, this is our life, this is what you're doing, and so you kind of get that behind the scenes thing which we all love. And anytime I can get I see what's happening in the front, but it's nice to be able to get like just a little bit more depth to the story. And so like with Instagram, it sounds like you're just giving that more depth. Like I find like with Twitter, I usually try to make it more of a more science. Like I'll put out a little bit, of like maybe personal stuff or fun stuff. Like say like with the conference this week, we were tweeting about the band that was playing last night, but it was still like conference related. But like with Instagram, I kind of feel like I just like open up a little bit more on there. It's more like more of my life, like, hey, this is like I'm currently sitting out here on the deck, working on my project. I'll like Instagram a photo of that, where I might not necessarily do that on Twitter per se.
And it's interesting that even when you ask this question, I don't think I've thought very much about like a strategy with that. I think it kind of naturally works out that way, like how you use the mediums differently, and then Facebook I use very differently than the other two, and but it is interesting how like you tackle different audiences with different mediums, and going back to that theme of like just getting people to have the conversation, and how regardless of how you're reaching them, like the fact that you're reaching them is huge. I have people from college that will, anytime they see something like with a lionfish in the article, they'll send it to me, and it like there was one article that like I had multiple friends sending to me, and I was like, this is awesome because this is an article that I don't know, maybe you weren't interested in before, but now you're like, oh, I can make that connection between like my friend who's out there doing this like crazy stuff and who knows where doing, so that's what I'd love to see.
Like how much like do you post? Because like that was something else that we had been discussing this week with the scicommers were here. Like like with Twitter, like I find like I post a lot during the day, especially during conferences and other big events. Like I'll just go Twitter crazy. But like I find like with Instagram, I usually tend to only post once a day, and then Facebook, I usually will never post once a day for those kind of like science related things. And then what other like media do you use too? So I guess I just gave you a 2-pronged question there.
No, it's cool. So I say Facebook, I only post for like really big things, like big life events. I would say. For Instagram, I do 1 post a day. Sometimes less. Occasionally, like 2, but never more than 2.
Do you try to like always post something once a day, so you always are having that like pop up in people's feeds, or is it only when you have something like interesting that you like put up? Because like sometimes I like wonder, am I like forcing that image that really is like what I feel is Instagram quality, but putting up. But then I also wonder like if I let it like lag a little, then am I starting to lose the audience and they're not going to be like as engaged? So
I think it's a fine balance, and like you definitely don't want to like try and make something work if it's not going to work, just for the sake of having a post.
Right.
But sometimes if I really haven't had something in a couple days, I'll go back to one of my images from like field work and be like, you know, throwback or whatever, and use that as an opportunity to show a cool image, or you know, thinking back to exploring blah 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 and whatever, and then throw in a little fact. So I'm not afraid to go back in the archives to pull something. And then on Twitter I post quite a lot. I would say. I would say I probably post like 8 times a day on like a busier day. Conferences are totally different. Or if I'm live tweeting, I'm like I have tons. But one thing I have really tried to do is make every post like digestible by itself. You know, I don't know if like sometimes I'll see like stories told out over multiple tweets. Where it's like if you see one out of context, it doesn't
totally
quite
the whole
make
thing.
sense. And so I try, and of course sometimes it's unavoidable. You only have 140 characters, but I try really hard to make what I'm trying to say accessible in just 140 characters. So
yeah, I've started now where like I want to say a little bit more on Twitter, but still like want to be able to put it out to that community on Twitter. Like I'll kind of just reply to myself in several tweets and kind of keep that thread
I've seen
going
that. That's
right
cool.
there.
I like that because then it gives that context of what you were talking about.
And then it makes it easier to follow too. It's not like all these like random tweets. You just like keep you can like scroll like right through on your phone and it's all like right there for you to be able to see.
And especially like as Twitter's algorithm changed, for example, like it used to be it was all chronological. And now it's like certain more popular tweets will pop up at the top. And you're like, wow, that's a lot of pressure to be like one of the popular tweets at the top. But again, it makes it harder to have those tweets stand alone. You know what I mean? Like, or it makes it more important to have those standalone tweets instead of in a big long narrative.
Yeah, speaking of having like popular tweets and stuff like that, yes, hello there from Russia. Awesome, so glad you could join us. But yeah, do you like find that you're still trying to figure out what it is that like really engages with people? Like there is a picture I posted a couple days ago. We did a run through the National Zoo for the conference, and there is, of course, you know, when you get a whole bunch of scientists in a zoo, people are like start taking photos. And so like there was a couple of runners that were taking photos of lions, and I just tweeted that out. It like just went like crazy. At least for me for Twitter, like it was just so many retweets and likes. And I'm just like, okay, I thought it was kind of cool, but it wasn't like that amazing. Where I've had some other posts where I'm like, this is really awesome, this is gonna be amazing, and like you might get 2 engagements. You're like, what? Like that just doesn't make any sense. Like what's going on? Like so you find like you're still kind of like figuring out like what your audience is into, or do you try to like get stuff that you know is going to engage them, or do you also try to put stuff out like they need to know this, they might not be engaging with it, but they still need to see it? Like how do you kind of like balance like trying to be engaging and getting more people in, but also getting out your message that you know you need to when it comes to things? I
still struggle all the time to figure out what people want to see, because as you said, sometimes I'll post something and I'll be like, this is funny, like people will enjoy this, and no one else thinks it's funny. And then like every once in a while, because mostly what you'll see on my feed is like science. You'll see like kind of, I don't know, you'll also see some more personal stuff, and the stuff that sometimes, like when I talk about fieldwork fails or funny things that kind of happen, I get more engagement. And again, I think that goes back to like humanizing, right? But I do post a ton about invasive species, like articles. I try to have my Twitter be like a place of context. Like, I get Google alerts.
I was just double checking. It did like sometimes it does like weird flash thing, and so like I like to like double check that it's actually still working here. So
I try and curate a ton of content on my Twitter feed, and I have Google alerts for lionfish and invasive species and all these different keywords. And then when I see those articles pop up in my inbox, I try and share them. And so most of those, like, I'm talking to a pretty niche audience, I think, with that, but I still think it's important for people to see that. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, like, I love that the Twitter is really a place where I feel like the stuff that I'm most interested in, I get to put up there without, the engagement doesn't worry me quite as much.
Okay.
Because it's important to get those messages out there.
Do you find that sometimes you're like talking in like an echo chamber of where like everyone like that is following you is on there like feels the same way you do, so you're basically just echoing back and forth like the same thing. The invasive species are bad. We need to do something about it, rather than being able to like branch out and do more outreach. Because I kind of feel like sometimes with Twitter or you're doing more in-reach, you're just talking to like other scientists or folks. I kind of already know this is an issue, maybe not like to the detail. You're right. Yeah, exactly.
And that's where I try. I mean, I really like to write, and I try and write as much as I can about these topics. And and I feel that yes, in my social media, it's like if you build it, they will come. Like if you set up like this kind of messaging, like the people who agree with that messaging are going to follow along.
Okay.
But when I blog or I've written articles for other outlets, you're reaching an entirely different, entirely new audience. Okay. And a lot of times in the comments, I'll get people who will debate with me, and like I love that. Like I want to like have you ask questions, and I want to. Any invasive species can be a very controversial topic. Yes. And it's not black and white, and I think that's one of the reasons why we like are interested in it anyway, because it is not clear cut. And so. In that case, I think definitely in those blog comments. Sometimes people can be like kind of mean. But,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but as long as you're engaging in this like healthy conversation, healthy debate. I also do. One of the things I really like to do is public speaking, and I've done a fair amount of public speaking. And sometimes the questions that I'll get there. They're really interesting because again, it's an entirely new audience. A lot of these people, maybe they didn't know what invasive species were before the talk, and so there's a lot of questions about that. So yeah, I think I try to use other outlets to reach different audiences, like through the speaking and through the writing, and that's always a good reminder that there are lots of different opinions out there, and people are coming from very different places. And
well, and even like when it's an opinion, like say with I work with butte swans, and people aren't very keen on having them pulled to help manage them. And while I'm someone who thinks that yes, that is a viable management practice to be able to help control the species, I understand that other folks don't necessarily agree with that, and it's good to be able for me to listen, because I have like this one point of view because of the path I've traveled through life and the science that I've seen. But it's good to be able to see that other things, because just because maybe the science is saying one thing doesn't mean that people's points aren't valid, even if they might not completely understand the science and have this sentimental attachment to an animal. So
and it's interesting how like what motivates people is very different, right? So for me, when I look at lionfish, I'm like, oh wow, there's all of these native fish species that are in trouble. Like, and for me, thinking of like the balance of the ecosystem and the importance, the ecological importance of those fish. But then there's people that are like, well, that's fine, but I'm really concerned about the fact that I'm a fisherman, and these lionfish are going after juvenile grouper and snapper in the mangroves, and like that's where I want to dedicate my energy. And you're like, oh, that's right. Like your livelihood, like the way they're approaching that problem is very different than the way I'm approaching that problem. So in that case, it's a good reminder of like how people are coming from such different views, but we're all like in that case, of course, we're all working towards the same ultimate goal. So, but it sometimes changes how you approach the communicating that problem.
We had a quick question asking what NAOC is, and that's the North American Ornithological Conference. So it happens every 4 years, and it's the biggest gathering of ornithologists. We had over 2,000 people, I believe, here, which is insane. Like, so a lot of bird folks here, in Washington, talking about their research and stuff this week. So, I know I've got some other questions, but if you guys have questions too, feel free to kind of send them in to talk about invasive species, science communication, science in general, outreach with public, any questions that you have for Erin or myself. So, I guess what's one of the what's the best way have you found with getting your message out, like where you feel like you get like the most engagement? Is it like Twitter, or like when you actually are like physically going and speaking to somebody, like which one do you find like works better?
I find that when I'm able to physically speak to a group of people, because it's as you talked about, when you're on Twitter or Facebook and there's so many messages coming to you at the same time, and you have people talking about things going on in their personal life and like the news and politics and everything, and it's hard to kind of stand out in that. But if you can get in front of a group of people and say your message, but then also you are a part of that message, right? So being able to say like, this is my experience, and like add personal stories in, it helps, again, using that word, humanize science, and to get in front of people and say, like, this is a problem, and I can give you all the statistics as to why this is a problem. And then I can also tell you, like, I've seen firsthand how this is impacting this community, and I can tell you my stories. I think that the responses that I get from people are much stronger.
Do you think it's because you're making that one-on-one connection with them, and you can do more of, like, a full, in-depth conversation with them at that point in time? So, like, or you're making that one, deep impact with somebody, versus Twitter, where it's kind of like more like this broad, like, broadcast, just, it's all these little bits and pieces, but maybe not, hitting them as hard as like what that one conversation that you could have just sitting one-on-one with someone.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, what resonates most with people is stories and storytelling. And so, when I speak to groups of people or one-on-one, I really try to incorporate that storytelling element. And with Twitter, it's hard because you're getting little snapshots instead of a whole narrative, right? So you're getting like, a little, like a link here, or like a quick thought or picture here. But then, to stand up in front of people and kind of weave them together into one kind of narrative, I think it resonates with people.
Yeah, we got someone in from France. Hi, hello, bonjour. I'm slowly starting to learn French. It's like I took it in high school, and I was at a conference a couple years ago for Great Lakes stuff, and had some people speaking French behind me. I'm like, you know what? We have people from Quebec that are part of this association. Like, it would, be good. Yeah. Hey there. And hi from the UK. Yes, wow. Yeah, so we're getting quite a lot of people from around the world, which is great.
That's great.
Yeah, but it was just kind of like one of those, like, learn how to communicate with people where they're comfortable. And I think that's another thing with science communication, is trying to find a way to be able to communicate with people where they're comfortable. And so, like, some people might like really resonate with Twitter, some people might really resonate with that one-on-one storytelling, and trying to like figure out what's going to work with what people. Do you try, like, when, say, like, if you're going to go talk to people, do you try to do media before and after to, like, kind of, like, get the message out a little bit so they have a little bit of an idea? Then you, like, really talk to them and hit them, right there, and get that, like, full on, like you said, storytelling message, and then you try to, like, follow up afterwards? Like, kind of what's, like, your strategy with things?
It's tough because a lot of, when I talk about speaking, a lot of times it's like, I show up to an event and I have 12 to 15 minutes to give a talk, and and then you leave. And so, for example, I did a TEDx earlier this year, which was really fun. But then leading up to that, I tried to talk about, like, hey, like, heads up, I'm coming to this TEDx. I use the hashtag. If there's ever a hashtag, I use it. But I also don't want to give too many details away. Like, I don't want to give. I want to. Because I practice really hard, right? So you want to, like, kind of wait and show it to them all at once, I guess. But
you want to get that big, like, awesome, like, reveal moment, like, in front of the audience. You don't want to give away like that.
Right. But then one of the things I really try and do after is that I give my presentation, and people can ask questions, but so many times, like, you don't know a question in the moment, and you think of it later, and so I always try to keep that. Say, like, listen, you can contact me on my website, you can find me on social media, you can tweet at me, and then I've found one of the really cool things is when you kind of offer that line of communication, a lot of times people will take you up on it, and then I've found people have messaged me being like, hey, like, you were studying lionfish, we have this really interesting problem in this state that you might be interested in, and I've found, like, people to interview for my website that way, and like found new potential projects that way. So that's one of the things I love most about social media is like, the conversation doesn't have to end there, right? We have this talk, people think about it, and then we can continue that conversation.
Yeah, like you started the discussion, and you can keep them. So any questions? Yeah, because there's so many times where, say, like, I will see a presentation and I don't have time maybe to ask a question because you get such limited time, and so to be able to have a way that I can contact them later via email or social media that I can ask them that question and then continue that on. Like a good example just earlier this week is I tweeted something about science communication, and I had someone from California contact me, and now we're continuing that conversation via email. And it's great because it's you can go that much more in depth with it. Like you can really tease apart like what it is you're trying to ask and find out and stuff like that. And it's I think I feel like Twitter is like a good way of like opening the door for people and like getting them in.
And what I like too is, for example, there's so many different types of invasive species, right? And I like can speak on like a handful. But then someone in a talk recently said like, hey, I have a question about like this invasive species, and I was like, I don't have experience with that, but if you follow up with me, I know where to find resources that will help you. And that's one way that like you have to know when to say like that's not my area of expertise, but there's still a way that I can help you and put you in contact with someone or a website or something that can help you.
Yeah, like I mean, just a brief like example is like I have a almost 9-year-old nephew now. He loves science and everything. So we were talking. Somehow we got in a conversation about bull sharks and how far up the Mississippi they will go.
Oh yeah.
And so he's like, I think they go all the way.
As 9-year-olds will do.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I totally was there, back in the day because I had all my zoo books and everything and doing all that.
Zoo books.
But it was, he was saying, I think they go all the way up to Minnesota. I'm like, sure, like I don't think they go up that far. Like I was like, I know they go like up fresh water, but I don't think they would go quite that far. And so like we were kind of friendly debating back and forth. And I was like, you know what? Let's find out. So like I tweeted out real quick, hey, does anyone know about bull sharks? I had a guy like answer back really fast that does bull shark research. He's like, yep, they actually do go up all that far. And then I was learning all these other like really cool facts because we kept the conversation going. And I was so excited, like, because my nephew wasn't with me, like, by the time I had started tweeting. And so I was able to go back to my nephew, like, by the way, guess what? You're right. Because, I was able to get a hold of someone, like, so fast like that. And it was just amazing you have that resource. I mean, where else? I mean, think of, 10, 15, 20 years ago, if you had that question, how would you have like found that out? It would have taken so much research to be able to find that one particular answer. You would have like tracked down someone and like call them like on the old like bad phone. So
and what a great experience for your nephew, because here is an example of like he had a question and you were able to pull together resources and answer that question, and he was like, cool, science.
Exactly. And they get so excited. I've been talking back and forth with Solomon David, who's worked at the Shed at USGS quite a lot, and there was a present I got my niece, which was like these little tryouts, and Solomon got all excited about it and everything. So I was telling my sister, this scientist from the Shed thinks your gift is really awesome. I like to help her like make her feel like more excited about it, like science and stuff. And my sister's family went to Chicago, and they got to go to the Shed Aquarium. There was a picture of Solomon up there, and they recognized him. And they're so cool. Made my sister send the photo to me, like, it's Solomon David. We saw Solomon David. And so, like, they're, like, getting to resonate with scientists, and thus are so excited about science. Like, my nephew right now, he loves baseball, and he loves science. So his plan for life is to go to school, get his undergrad degree, go play Major League Baseball for like the next 15 years after that, and then once he's done playing, he's going to become like a full-time scientist.
That is awesome.
Isn't that amazing? I was like,
dream.
Kid, I love you,
man.
Oh my
gosh, that's fantastic.
But like by being able to hit people and have like that engagement where they can see other scientists, it's not just me, and to see how awesome science is and how cool it is, it like inspires them and gets them interested in it, and so like they're getting all of this cool input to it. So
and it allows like to see the personality behind the scientist too, and that is a great like mentoring opportunity, right? And that's a big thing that I think is so important, is being able to mentor younger budding scientists. And I was really lucky in that my parents really encouraged me in science, and I had lots of opportunities to play around with like microscopes and like and that was really, or play around outside and like get muddy in the creek and that kind of stuff, and that was hugely important for me in developing my love of science. So even if some a kid now can find that through social media and like find people that they're interested in and interact with them in that way, which is just fantastic. it.
Right.
So.
Yeah, like one thing I kind of want to do with Periscope at some point in time is actually take this out into the field. So
Oh, yeah.
We're out there, like, say if Solomon David's pulling a gar, out of the Great Lakes, to be able to like be live on air and be able to have people engage and they can ask the questions about that particular species and why they're doing the sampling the way they are, and so that way they can see, behind that curtain of science. Because sometimes I think for people out in the public, they don't always necessarily understand what it is they do. They hear the results of the studies,
right.
but it's like this big mystery box of what it is that we do, and so you can kind of like reveal that a little bit, and so there's maybe a little bit more public trust with science.
Yeah, which is a huge issue right now. A huge issue.
No. So. And then you can really illustrate, say like with lionfish, like, hello, these are all the lionfish that we pulled out today. Yeah. Public, like here, they're all laid out. It's not just like one or two here. You can actually visually see all of that. So, if you guys have any questions for Erin and I, well, any things you want to talk about, scicomm, invasive species, life as a young scientist, growing up in the modern world of social media, feel free to ask away. I don't know. So, what else can you tell us about life as a scicomm stuff? What's the most rare species of the world?
I don't know the answer to that question.
I really don't know. Well, wasn't there like some cave fish that they found down in the southwest or something that is it like a blind fish or something along I remember seeing something on Twitter about that. It was like it's only
should ask Twitter.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, yeah. Put that on Twitter and ask. Yeah, but I think they said it was only found in one little small little not even like a pond, but almost like a puddle of water somewhere or something like that. But yeah, I mean, for sure, definitely send those tweets out. And a good thing too when you're asking things on Twitter about stuff, make sure you ask different societies. So anytime I have a question about an insect that I take a photo of, I have no clue what it is. I may generalize okay, I know it's a butterfly or something, but I not know the species. So I'll tag the Entomology Society and usually they're so amazing with helping me to ID things or any questions like that. So with fish or something like that, tag American Fisheries Society. Any wildlife stuff, there's always Wildlife Society. Tag Nat Geo. I'm sure you're going to have a lot of people who follow that and will be willing to help out with answers. So.
I'm trying to think too, you're talking about, just switching gears a little bit, but talking about what it's like being a young scientist, right? Mm-hmm. And I think, going also along the lines of asking questions and kind of pushing, I think one of the things that was a really valuable lesson for me to learn is not taking no for an answer sometimes.
Okay.
When I went to apply for my first grant, I was 19 and totally, for most places, unqualified because I hadn't graduated undergrad, I hadn't done any research, and I went to a professor to ask for advice, and he told me to wait a couple of years and apply because I was a little young, and that hurt my ego, and so I did it anyway, and I still got the grant. So, but I think, it was also recognizing that that first project, and this is how I kind of got started on the scicomm track, was interview based because I knew I didn't have the experience and the knowledge to be able to do a full hypothesis driven research project, data project. So anyway, that was an important lesson for me. And you're going to get a lot of no's, and you're going to get grant rejections, and you're going to get other sorts of bumps in the road, but then not letting that discourage you.
Yeah, there was the first plenary that we had this week was Jessica Meir from NASA, who is, it was just absolutely amazing. Easily, by the way, when I periscoped it, I will put this up on YouTube, but you guys definitely need to watch this for sure. But it was very inspirational because she said how she was initially rejected by NASA.
Really?
And so she went back to her life, was teaching and everything, and then she had this opportunity pop up to reapply, and she's like, well, do I want to do it? And she's like, well, it was her dream growing up, and so even though that door was shut, she still ended up still pursuing it, and now she's an astronaut. I mean, it's just, it gives you that chance, that door might, just because it's shut doesn't mean it's not going to reopen. So keep pushing and try to don't give up on your dream.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If it's something you really want to do.
When I applied, this is before my grant work, but when I applied for an internship at Nat Geo, I applied for 5 internships before the 6th one worked out. and it was like none of them, they just weren't the right fit. It wasn't the right time.
All right.
And then through that internship, I learned about the grant program.
Okay.
And then I got my grant, and then I changed my major. I mean, there was all these like,
Yep.
you know, kind of this waterfall effect of things that happened after that. So
Exactly.
yeah, and next, I mean, I'm working here in DC, but eventually want to continue my education and my work, and so we'll see kind of what's up next for that. So.
Yeah. Well, if we are like really getting any questions about scicomm and other things, you feel good with starting to like wrap things up? So
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. This is fantastic.
Sure.
I can't wait to see the other Periscopes.
Yeah.
On YouTube.
Yeah, it's. I think it's a really good, usable format for just doing like quick interviews like this with people when you're at conferences and things, and also like we were talking about, you know, maybe going out into the field and doing that kind of stuff, and to be able to have like engagements with people, you know, in science or in the general public too. So I'm just gonna flash this back up for everybody. So Twitter handles are wildlifebiogal.com, and then ET Spencer. Oh wait. I was using No, I was like wildlifebiogal.com. That's really not the actual. It's still lack of sleep here from NAOC. So Wildlife Biogal is my Twitter handle. ET Spencer is Erin's Twitter handle. Feel free to get a hold of us there. If you didn't get to catch the whole broadcast and want to be able to watch it again, go to wildlifebiogal.com, and there's links to YouTube and SoundCloud, of which I will be putting those up later for you guys. In the meantime, I hope you guys have a great Sunday. Keep doing science communication, and let us know how you use science communication to engage with other people. So,
Bye.
have a good one.
Thanks.
Bye.